Today, the first class after this break would be about some important set of articles which will signify the shift in how GS2 paper is evolving. So I just wanted to bring to your notice the slightly philosophical tinge that you would be witnessing in the second paper, GS2. Now, what is this philosophical tinge? In every governance, every polity issue, you see an element of purpose. And this purpose orientation is something that we generally see in ethics. For example, this time they asked a question on CAG, for example, in GS2. What will happen if CAG is not doing their designated duty? Something on these lines was asked. Many such similar questions appeared in GS2 paper this year, which made it difficult to answer. And in GS4, it's the other way around. There were many questions which felt like they were a domain of GS2. It was not so straightforward and obvious in GS4. Now, this warrants us to go back to the table and think and reorient our direction. How do we look at this entire subject? This is where interdisciplinary thinking comes into the picture, where you are able to link GS2 to GS4 or GS3 to GS4, GS1 to GS3, whatever. So, why am I talking about this? Because this article begins with this very same approach. We are talking about the alternative dispute resolution. Usually you will find this topic in the domain of GS2, judiciary. Now I am not going to dwell into the statistics, etc. But let's look at facts. In GS2, we are going to talk about principles. In polity, for example, you are talking about judiciary. In prelims level, they will test the factual awareness and the analysis that stems out of factual awareness. Okay? And in mains, you are expected to have a reason behind this fact. Okay? So, whenever this reason which establishes the political structure, let's say for example, we decided that judiciary in India is bestowed with the responsibility of handling justice and ensuring the spirit of the constitution exists in its spirit. Why is it like this? Then you go to the concept of separation of powers. Right? Entire argument will begin from why do we need separation of powers, and as a manifestation of that understanding, you will see judiciary and its design. This is how usually you should study right from the word go, from the conceptual level. You should know the importance of a concept, why it is like that, how is it manifesting in Indian constitution, what is its implication. If that is not happening, let's say judiciary is supposed to be in the shape of a square. If it is not like that, why is it distorted? That reasoning part or what is not working part, you should have a clear-cut understanding. This is how it is designed. It is not like this. There must be some reason behind it. How to fix it? This discussion and deliberation is like a continuous dialogue between what is and what ought to be. This line of thinking is usually deployed in ethics. But given the shift in the nature of the questions, you are going to witness that even in GS2. Okay? So, let's see from today that element of shift or the paradigm, shift in the way questions are asked. You should learn to observe within the articles a trend that will showcase the contrast between what was and what ought to be. Let's begin with this specific article of ADR. Here you will see the concept of doctrine of Panch Parmeshwar. Let me go back and explain this slightly. What do you mean by this doctrine of Panch Parmeshwar? See, the word Panchayat, the word Panchayat came from this philosophical origin. According to the traditions, Panch Parmeshwar reflects the collection of the 5 wise men who would come together to deliberate upon what is considered to be right and wrong and deliver the idea of justice. Over a period of time within the Indian society, that transformed into the so-called Panchayat. After independence and after the 73rd and 74th Amendment Act, we have tried to institutionalize the local governments, and at the village level, we wanted to institutionalize this Panchayati Raj system. But anyway, you must be wondering, this is about democracy. This is about elected representatives, right? How is it even relevant in the discussion of judiciary? This must be a question you should be asking. So, you should understand the dual nature, historically dual nature of the Panchayati Raj system. They were creating laws and they were also adjudicating justice. So, there was concentration of powers within the hands of a few people. But the system was so designed that at the local level, the system itself took care that there was no bias. Inherently, there were customs and rituals in such a way that the end objective of this whole conflict, let's say there are 2 parties having a conflict at a village level, A and B. Those 2 parties came to a panchayat, the collection of the 5 people or whatsoever number of people they are there. They deliberate upon what is right and wrong. There, the objective was not to dispose of a case as you see in the modern day courts. There is an element of empathy because it is rooted in the culture. It is rooted in the local demography. They knew each other. They understood the context better. The purpose is not just to dispose of a case, but rather it is to bring about a consensus to build an element of trust that must have eroded in that conflict. To restore that trust, this deliberation was considered to be the mechanism. So, originally, these panchayat members were the so-called mediators. Mediation. Okay? Now, the modern day equivalent of this is the alternative dispute resolution. But you must be wondering, why did we even have courts in the first place? The courts were supposed to handle justice. If they were doing their job, why do we need these alternative mechanisms? Here is where we have to take a look at the data. See, judiciary was supposed to do this job. If it were doing its job, we wouldn't be having so many pending cases. Who is saying that we are having so many pending cases? Let's go back to the literature, research reports. We have something called the India Justice Report of 2025. You can see here. Yeah, India Justice Report 2025. It highlights major problems within the judiciary. One is access. 2 is delay. 3 is accountability. Judicial accountability. This is the question asked in 2025. Take a look at the 11th question, 15 marker, first one. What is constitutional morality? How can we use constitutional morality as a bridge between judicial independence and judicial accountability? Right. This is a problem cited, and the answer that they were expecting is constitutional morality. Anyway, let's come back to that constitutional morality aspect, because it's an ethical argument also. Now, judiciary is supposed to do that job of delivering justice. Somehow, it is not delivering. The National Judicial Data Grid will talk about the numbers. There is heavy load of pending cases. And you can see, even in high courts, you have as many as 62.9 lakh pending cases. The situation has not gotten better any time since 2009. The 264th, if I'm not wrong, 264th Law Commission report mentioned that it would take somewhere around 400 or 300 years or some number, more than 100, that's what I can say, for all of these cases to be disposed of. What does it indicate? Absolute inefficiency, and that's why we wanted to create an alternative mechanism. And that's why we have ADR. Okay, so you have arbitration, reconciliation, mediation. These are the different methods of alternative dispute resolution mechanisms. Now, recently we have had a mediation bill 2023. Let's get back to that. But before all of this, why do we have to take this extra load? Let it take its own time, right? No. Justice delayed is justice denied. How can you wait for justice? Your very existence is at question sometimes. And therefore, as a part of the directive principles of state policy, according to Article 39A, the constitutional basis or the reasoning for the existence of ADR systems in our country is Article 39A. Not just ADR, justice delivery as such. It's the responsibility of the state to give that to the people, the citizen of this country. In extension to that, we have already had many arbitration mechanisms, including the Section 89 of the Code of Civil Procedure, which recognizes this kind of alternative dispute resolution mechanisms. But why aren't they functioning? Majorly, here is where we have to talk about this Panch Parameshwar doctrine. There is an element of mistrust when it comes to this whole judiciary, whether it is any litigation, High Court, Supreme Court, Tribunal, anywhere. People are inherently having an attitude of mistrust towards this. And yet we are approaching them because we don't have any other alternative mechanism. So out of court settlements are common because people do not have faith in judiciary, that they would get their justice on time. That needs to change. Here is where the minister says we are trying to adopt the Panch Parameshwar doctrine and inculcate those values, where the objective is not just to dispose of a case, but rather rebuild that social capital that was lost in the conflict. So that is what he says. How can we do that? According to former Chief Justice, mediation is a tool for social change. When you involve more and more number of people in a dialogue through some fora, that will probably facilitate the exchange of views and help us arrive at a middle ground to resolve that conflict. So mediation should be mainstreamed through involving more and more number of people. That's the point number one. Second thing, the India Justice report also highlights the interstate disparities in terms of backlogs. So some statistics are given. One of the suggestion given here is we need to increase the number of judges. It's a fair ask and pretty straightforward also, because judicial pendency is because of understaffing also. Infrastructure needs are also not met. That part also can be taken care. India Justice report also says that states are ranked based on their performance. So there can be a sense of a competition between the states. Just like how Niti Aayog facilitates a framework of cooperative and competitive federalism, why not bring it to judiciary also? incorporating the public within this. So, mediation bill, mainstreaming mediation, involving more number of people, deploying this Panch Parmeshwar will at least help us move in the direction of mainstreaming this whole mistrust towards judiciary. This is the major focus of this article. So please go back and read this. Treat employment as a national priority. Why? Yes, why? It's not a new news item. India is entering into a phase of demographic dividend. What does that mean? We have so many people waiting for jobs. If we don't give them jobs on time, we are going to suffer. As many as 11 crore people might be applying for jobs in the next few years. And if we can't facilitate them in our day-to-day needs, we are going to suffer. How do we do this? To understand how do we create so many employment opportunities for everyone, first of all, let's go back to the table and figure out what is the problem. Can you tell me the problem? Take a look at your engineering degrees, for example. We are overeducated but underskilled. There is a mismatch between what the companies want and what we have. How do we plug that gap? Without involving the industry, it is difficult. There is no incentive for the industry to skill so many people. Therefore, you have to create a tax tool as a instrument to make it easier for companies to skill so many people. That is one oversimplified solution. But anyway, since newspapers are coming up with it, let's put it in the paper. My own perspective, why tax alone cannot facilitate skilling? Often, a lot of policymakers say that we'll give tax incentives. Tax incentives work when there is a trade-off. When there is nothing to trade off, it's a complete burden. Like, let's say, for example, if you have to carry out a business, the cost of input should be less than output, right? Now, let's say the project is worth $1 million. As a company, we would want to fetch the talent that would finish the job in as little cost as possible. So if I have a budget of $1 million, I would ideally want to finish it in entire project in 300K US dollars. But the cost of training this freshers itself will increase it to $600. And it's also inefficient. So where is the tax component here? I would rather pay tax than double my budget and also double my time period, which will make me lose my client. That is the new challenge that we have right now. Anyway, so what this article suggests is that we have to create a national employment policy. Divide the available jobs into various sectors, primary, secondary and tertiary. And also map them to the rural areas, urban areas. And figure out the available talent pool by enrolling them onto a common platform. Where if the employer wants, they will log in into that employment exchange, see the available talent and then map their resources to see if they fit. So a mix and match of all these strategies is going to work. Till now the problem is every ministry has their isolated sporadic events, list of events. This is not going to work. We need to stop working in silos and bring them all onto a common platform. And there should be an integrated planning as well as coordinated effort in simultaneously skilling them, bringing them on board with both academia as well as industry, and technology and innovation should be supported not just through monetary incentives, but also through technical incubation. So connecting especially the rural sector to the uh, startup ecosystem, working on the social problems of the rural areas through innovation, that will also create a lot of employment opportunities. And a lot of rural startup ideas do not take off because of lack of this incubation system. That should also be an additional component. That is the gist of this article. So, in this article, what do you want me to focus on? This sectors to zero in on. Usually, you will see urban uh, poverty alleviation schemes. They are literally absent. On paper, you will have something like NRLM, urban, etc. But they don't really work. Primarily because the needs of the city and the needs of the rural sector are different. So if you overlap the type of works and you don't update the policy design from time to time, they are ineffective for that reason. So we need to come up with programs and skilling ecosystem that will target the urban poor. That is what this article says. India's direction for disaster resilience. See, here you need to know the international framework and the evolution. This is a direction based article. So, before and after, this should be very clear to you. Actually, disaster management started with something called the Hyogo framework. Then the world in 2015, 10 years ago, moved towards something called the Sendai framework. And India responded by coming up with a national disaster management plan. However, in 2016, there was a 10-point program from the Prime Minister for disaster risk reduction. But before discussing all of this, let me tell you the simplest way you can understand this. See, disaster management is in the history of India a subject that is coming into focus only after a disaster happens, post disaster. But what about the pre-disaster? Can you avoid it? Of course we can. How? By better preparation. This aspect has been missing in the entire planning of our country. So, this whole post-Sendai framework thought process is emphasizing on the pre-disaster phase, where we are having this phase where there is a renewed effort on how we see disaster resilience through three different strategies. One, we are looking at the finance aspect. Two, it is the technology aspect. Three, it is the technology, finance, 1 second. This article talks about technology, finance and nature-based solutions. Okay. So, what is the first shift? Till now, when it comes to finance, it was only through debt instruments. Whenever a disaster happens, the government used to take some debt and give it to the people for relief. Now that paradigm has shifted towards, after the 15th Finance Commission, it has shifted towards reduction of risk and also adapting to that risk. How? Take a look at the 15th Finance Commission. For disaster preparedness, it has given 30% allocation. It has given for capacity building 10% and mitigation 20%. Okay. So, this restructuring of the financial terms indicates a philosophy where we want to prioritize disaster resilience rather than a reaction towards disaster. Second, when it comes to technology, let's say early warning systems. That is one kind. Or any new technology in terms of detecting disasters. Let's say, for example, Mission Mausam, where Doppler radars, which gave IMD, Indian Meteorological Department, a new lease of life in predicting with much more clarity what disasters will happen prior. Next up, you also have remote sensing. You have the GIS systems. These GIS systems will help us understand the data on a real-time basis, which will give us a better picture of the event. And finally, when we're talking about the nature-based solutions, for example, we have spawn cities, we have rejuvenation of rivers, wetlands, etc. All these solutions which focus on correcting the issues that arise because of the destruction of nature. We are trying to use nature only to restore that balance rather than coming up with some technological plans. Finally, we are looking at a global level alliance. Let's say there are multilateral organizations like BIMSTEC, G20, even the Coalition for Disaster Risk Resolution, Disaster Resilience. These articles are, I've posted a series of articles on this Telegram channel. Go back to those articles also and read about them. There are some important case studies about nature-based solutions, about how Brazil is handling all that. Go back and read them as well. Okay, that will conclude the direction aspect, and I think this article is extremely important for your disaster management. You can get a direct question stating how there is a shift in, how can you say that there is a shift in India's whole management about disaster management plan. Okay. Okay. This article, I have some throat issue, I'm not able to speak up. I'll just give you briefly an outline of what this article is about, and also this article, which is important mostly from prelim standpoint. Okay, so the whole issue here is how AI is changing the education landscape. Take a look at the stakeholders. We have teachers, we have students, we have governance systems, and the overall thought process, the thought process of scientific temper. Each of this element should be addressed when you are creating a policy. What is the role of a teacher? The very basis of nurturing students in education is through a dialogue. AI is literally taking away that human touch. That is one problem. Because of this, there is documented proof that the knowledge is not imparted in a structured way. There are some leaps, or there are some gaps in the foundational learning methods. If you are directly using AI without guardrails, whatever biases that AI models will have, kids will also start having them. That is the first ethical challenge. Initially, a lot of people thought that educators will not use AI tools, but they were the first one to outsource everything to AI. And this is a major concern because AI can hallucinate. There is something called hallucination, where AI can imagine stuff. AI can come up with situations where recently OpenAI also came up with this warning that on the front it will show that the model is thinking and it has produced some result, but in the background it is actively refraining from showing the actual result. And this has been a problem. And one more problem I'll tell you. For example, you carry out Google research. Once the Google search comes up, you will see that at the bottom you have 100 pages. Recently Google reduced it to 10. You know why? LLM models search hundreds of pages for a better and deeper context. Now by reduction of those number of pages to just 10, you're only getting superficial knowledge. Even though the teacher is experienced, outsourcing it to AI, thinking that it will anyway take care. You are seeing a trend where normalization of mediocrity is happening. These are all the ethical dilemmas of using direct usage of AI. Where can AI be deployed in technology? I mean, in education as a technology. In improving the outcomes. It requires measured thought by the teachers and the system overall. How can we make outcomes better? This should be the point of focus. In the absence of such thought process, AI systems will actually degenerate the whole education system, and that's the discussion here. Go back and read it. And Sir Crick issue is a self-explanatory article. Please go back and read it from the Telegram channel itself. That's it for the day. See you tomorrow.